Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals, and mums, Kirsty and Catherine.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves. Hello and welcome to Mission Imperfect. This is an auspicious occasion because technically this is the start of series 2. We decided completely randomly. So welcome to episode 1 of series 2 of Mission Imperfect. And it seems appropriate that our topic for this week is success, following neatly on from one we did in series 1 about failure. So Catherine, you suggested this as our first topic of the new series. Take it away.
Me onto the spotlight. Thank you. Well, I thought, let's start with something that sounds really positive because obviously I'm very aware it might sound like we might pick negative topics, but actually, hopefully, if people do listen to that failure episode, they'll realise that we're actually a lot more comfortable with that phrase and we don't see it in that sort of doom and gloom light. But nevertheless, let's flip it round and let's talk about success because we want to focus on the good things. But I thought it'd be interesting for us to focus today on actually what do we mean by success? How do you translate that to life as well? Because obviously, as life coaches, that's what we're interested in. So let's start, as we often do, turn to the dictionary. Let's get a nice concrete definition rather than me
Love a
making one up.
definition.
So it said it is the accomplishment of an aim or purpose or the achievement of results wanted or hoped for. I thought, okay, so we go. We've got somewhere to start. But then where I think it gets a bit tricky is this bit about translating it to life. And I think, and it'd be interesting to see if you think these also translate as fairly true. If we think of some conventional indicators of success in life, we might think about things like wealth. We might think about climbing the career ladder, perhaps owning your own home, and maybe a certain level of success, of status. Sorry, status.
Yeah.
So those were
Mhm.
kind of the four things that came to mind to me when we think about these conventional indicators. What do you think, Kirsty? Is there anything that I missed there?
Oh, nothing that's springing to mind. I got a bit distracted by that certain level of status, to be honest, because I realized a little bit uncomfortably the kind of impact I enjoyed being able to have in some circumstances when people would say, "What do you do?" And you say, I'm a director in HR, and you could see their attitude to change when they heard a word like director.
Mm. Yeah, it often
And
translates to job titles, doesn't it? This kind of sense,
yeah,
but it sort of goes hand in hand, I think, a little bit with that climbing of the career ladder. Like certainly for us in our backgrounds in HR, it's quite there's quite an obvious path, isn't there, of progression through the job titles that you hear associated with HR. So when you get higher up that ladder, you'll have the job title associated with that, and potentially a perspective that that's a marker of success. But then this is where I think it all gets a little bit sticky, and not just on the status one. I agree, that's the one that I personally feel a little bit icky about. Well, we'll come on to that later. That lack of status, actually.
a bit
But
icky, but
even,
it also resonated because I realized that I used it as a tool. If I felt people were being dismissive of me or sort of treating me as the little woman kind of thing, it changed things.
mm, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How people respond to you and how they might perceive you as successful, or maybe other words, like not to be trifled with kind of thing, as opposed to, it's interesting, isn't it? We have these
Are
sort
we,
of,
are we doing trifle instead of biscuits this series?
well,
Sorry.
It's a very dubious dessert link. Yeah, I wasn't sure how we could talk about successful biscuits this week, but no doubt we might be able to pop it in there somewhere. But let's go slightly back on track about these four areas and about them
Yeah.
being indicators of success in life.
Mhm.
And the reason I find that they get a little bit sticky is, if we're really honest, is this a sign of success? And on whose terms is it? I
Mm.
think we might be putting more emphasis on a sort of societal pressure there rather than personal fulfillment. And if it's like these universal markers, we hear the phrase one
Yeah.
size doesn't fit all. I think it gets bandied around a lot and it's a little bit annoying actually. And I hate the phrase cookie cutter and all this kind of stuff. But they are making a point, aren't they? We are different. So why should
Really.
our markers of success be the same?
An excellent question. And I mean, society as a whole, the idea that having a certain amount of money and status, whatever, a certain amount of observable material wealth constitutes success. And yet that there are also sort of cultural and family pressures that can come into play, can't they? Yes,
Yeah.
especially family pressure and expectations. What your family wants for you, your parents in particular, it can be around wanting you to have what they never did, even if, and with the very best of intentions, but not necessarily taking into account the question of whether you actually want it. And they want you to be, secure and happy, and then, that have the opportunities they didn't. But in doing so, it can create a whole level of expectation and pressure around what your life should look like, what success will look like.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
your.
No, and I don't, because there are other terms in there, aren't there? There are things like security and a bit of certainty. And I
Mm,
totally understand the desire to want that for other people.
mm,
But does that have to translate in these markers? I think
yeah,
that's the real question, because I suppose you might think there is a certain amount of stability in owning your own home, but actually there's a huge amount of obligation and, for people paying mortgages off for an incredibly long time. I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day actually, and the the guest financial expert was saying that a lot of young people, they're taking out 40-year mortgage terms. That's not uncommon now. And you think that's a massive commitment.
yeah.
Does it is it always the best route for people? It may not be, and yet it's this kind of conventional marker. Um, so I wanted to talk about this idea about what about success, including things that relate to our happiness, contentment, and fulfillment. And I don't want to just say that flippantly in a sort of woo kind of, make the world a happy place and you don't have to worry about things like security. I'm not suggesting that either, but I don't want people to feel like you have to look for those traditional markers if they just don't feel like they're right for you. So for example, talking about the career ladder, what if you realize later in life it's the wrong ladder? You actually would
Mm,
much rather be on a different one. Is it therefore unsuccessful to come off that ladder and talk about that sort of they call it the sunken fallacy, don't they, when you perhaps take yourself away from a path that you were on and you've invested, a lot of
mm,
time, training, years of your career, as it were. But what if the ladder next door is actually an awful lot more appealing to you and on a different level as well? Who's to
yeah.
say you have to keep going up the ladder?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the top of the ladder may be way too uncomfortable for some people, dizzying heights create vertigo.
Mm,
But, and the pressure that comes with those kind of roles, if what matters to you is, your family life, spending time with your friends, pursuing certain interests, then a high pressure, all hours job is not going to make you happy. And, as you say, it's not about going, all pink fluffy cloud about it. It's about recognizing that perhaps that, it's about balance, which is important on a ladder. Glad to see that we're keeping our
yes.
metaphors consistent here. Uh,
Yeah.
it is about balance, isn't it? Finding the point that gives you, I suppose, the best compromise, the best of all worlds. And these days, the idea that you are going to choose one career and stick with it and just keep climbing that ladder seems to be fading somewhat. It seems there's a recognition that your career path is likely to look far more squiggly than just, a steady uphill slog. That you
Yeah.
may jump around between different types of job in different industries, doing different things, finding what works for you, and that's brilliant. And I recently read, oh, my mind's just gone completely blank. Radical Candor
Oh,
by Kim Scott, I think she's called. And she talked about an environment where the the high performers in a team were recognized either as superstars, that the people who, wanted career progression were destined to go all the way to the top, etc., or rock stars, the people who were at their ideal level, the people who didn't want to go any further, who loved what they did and were brilliant at what they did, and who brought a sense of sort of continuity to the team, were always reliable. And when, they produced excellent work that was needed and necessary. So often people like that can be overlooked
mm,
when in fact they are extremely important in any in environment. And perhaps they are the ones that are finding that balance more than better than some others are.
yeah. It all comes down to this sort of personal view of success, doesn't it? And I think
Yeah.
what is it you get caught up in thinking about that matters? And of course that changes over time. And we're going to come on to some of that. We're going to talk a little bit about basically trying to define success your own imperfect way instead of perhaps just thinking about those conventional markers. But just to briefly cover some of those sort of what I guess we would call success traps, and we've spoken
Mm.
about them a little bit already about conforming to traditional views even if they don't feel right. But there's also that obvious one to mention, which is comparisons. And I think we have spoken about this before, and I think I've called it the road to nowhere. And it's a very difficult one, isn't it? Because it's hard not to compare, even when you're not intending to compare, because you see and you hear and you observe what other people are doing and saying and how they're living their lives. And it's natural to think, oh, aren't they doing really well? Or, oh, I'd love to have what they have. But it is they're not you. And it's yeah, do you actually even really want what they've achieved at, at what cost? I think that's a really good point that I think you probably made, Kirsty, the first time around when we spoke about comparisons. What might it have taken to reach that level of success? And
Yeah.
are you prepared to give that? At what expense?
No, almost certainly not. No.
Mm, just generically,
Far,
no. Yeah.
far too lazy. But yeah, those comparisons, and it's very easy to see, somebody has done well and is having an amazing, luxury exotic holiday somewhere exclusive. And as you think, I want a piece of that. And yet that, yeah, who wouldn't like a luxury holiday? And seeing that, you immediately start comparing yourself to them. They've gone down this path, so I need to go down that path if I want what they've got. But the holiday is just a symptom, and if you're miserable 99% of your life and happy for the 1% that's on holiday, is that success?
Mm. That's the way you can achieve a sort of similar result, but a different way. I think we have
Mm.
views about sometimes we have to grind for things like this to happen to us. But this is probably slightly encroaching on a future episode where we're actually going to talk a little bit about money and one of those markers
Mm.
of success. But let's
Yeah.
revert back to these other sort of possible success
Mhm.
traps. And I do think, and I heard someone very well known actually talking about this recently in a podcast, and they're someone who's phenomenally successful by all those traditional markers, but they realized that they were actually losing sight of some of those other things that mattered, the sort of happiness, contentment, because it was an always striving thing. It was like, oh, I'll reach this amazing milestone. You reach that milestone, And instead of feeling elated, you feel a little bit flat and just look for the next one. It's like reaching, you've been looking at that summit of a mountain. You get there and you realize there's just a bigger one behind it. So you think, well, I have to climb that one now. It's just like, where does it end if you get into that kind of trap of just
Yeah,
sort of striving? Oh, yeah, well, what is enough?
it's almost addiction, isn't it? But what came up for me when you were saying that was the whole thing about the dopamine hit, that high achievers, that they keep hitting these amazing milestones. High achievers will achieve great things, and you get a certain dopamine hit from doing that. The knowledge that you've done it, the kind of the validation and a celebration you get from others. If you keep getting that, then you need more and more of it to drive that dopamine hit, don't you?
Mm.
It doesn't,
Yeah, you lose sight, I think, of the thing that was supposed to matter,
yeah.
which then begs the question, well, did it actually really matter? And I think that, I know that
Mm,
sounds like a really strange loop to go around in your head, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It's like
I do,
if
yes.
it becomes about something else rather than the thing that you were trying to achieve, was it actually the right thing? Was it really your marker of success? So talking of
Yeah.
which, let's talk a little bit about success on your terms, your way. And when we look back at those definitions that we mentioned at the start, so that aim or purpose to accomplish, you get to decide what that is. And it can change over time. I think that's the other really important thing. I think we'd both acknowledge we're probably very different now, later in life, than perhaps we were in our 20s. Our idea of
I
success,
hope
I
so.
was definitely very career orientated. That's what I guess I thought and was really important to me. Obviously, things have changed in my life. I've become a parent and various other things. So my point is, you choose, and you can choose again. It's not a sort of set
Mhm.
in stone thing. And the other definition, the achievement of results wanted or hoped for, there's a lovely big clue in it. It's you want it, not that you think you should want it or other people want it for you. You want it. So you
Yeah.
get to choose what that's going to be.
Yeah, the result wanted by you.
Mm. Yes.
And it can be so easy to get swept away in that to be conditioned into assuming that you want something, the financial success, the career progression. And maybe you won't know until you're there that you don't, that it's not doing it for you. It sort of comes back to what you were just saying around what really matters. What is achieving this, what is it actually doing for me? What values is it meeting? What needs is it meeting? Is that what makes me feel good?
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
everything we try to achieve, we will learn from, either because we'll discover that it is what we want, and that's win-win, or we're going to discover that actually it's showing us that that's not the right way, and it gives us the opportunity to try something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of it's very interesting is when we talk about purpose, as you rightly said, Kirsty, it doesn't always have to be these huge, lofty things. It absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to be. As long as it matters to you and you understand what you mean by it, then it's okay. And it's really interesting because in my own experience, it took me quite a long time to realize I was sort of allowed, for want of a better word, to want something different to some of these very traditional things. Which I don't give away I do this all the time, Kirsty. I give away my answer to the question during the episode, and then when we get to it, I've got nothing extra to add, so I won't go into it
As,
quite yet.
as I said
We'll talk
earlier,
a little
yeah.
bit. Yes, as I said earlier. So let's talk a little bit about this defining success. So it makes sense to focus on what it is that you really value and what your core values are. And we've spoken about this
Mm.
before in another episode. So I think don't worry, in the show notes we'll connect the dots to all these previous episodes where you might find some useful tidbits. But if you understand what is important to you, that is going to be one of your first big clues and areas to look for. Am I are my sort of success markers, are they in line with those, or actually am I saying two slightly different things?
Yeah, they are such useful little signposts, aren't they?
Mm,
In helping you find the way that's right for you.
yeah, absolutely. And as you said, Kirsty, when it comes to careers, this concept of a career for life has definitely been dropping away, hasn't it? More and
Mm.
more. I think we're much, we hear these terms like portfolio career, and it's kind of a thing now. It used to be, I think there used to be a bit more of a negative connotation of, oh, someone skipped jobs a lot, are they
Yes,
unreliable, and all these kinds of things. But
sticking to it.
actually, doesn't it show that this is someone who's put themselves out there? They've gone through a recruitment process perhaps a few times, and they've impressed, and they've adapted, and they've moved, and they've got different skill sets and
Mm,
experience for those
absolutely.
things. And that's not, who's to say that that's a bad thing? And again, even more importantly, for them, if that's what they enjoy and that's what matters. And we can translate this again to the things like we said, like buying a house. You maybe will choose not to, because there are definitely downsides to it as well as the upsides. Yes, you think it's security, but it's also a huge obligation. I don't know if you're the same person with home ownership. You feel like I've just decorated one area, but it's not like you think, ah, that's it, I'm done. You have to keep going round and round and round and
It's
finding
a
more
never
jobs
ending
to do,
story.
don't you?
It's like cleaning it, the thing, yes. Um,
Mm,
yeah, and you just said something really important about there. It's for you. So if the whole traditional idea of success is what appeals to you, that's brilliant. If that is what really makes you happy, you want the house, you want a career that gives you a sense of status and accomplishment, not just for yourself, but in the eyes of society. And that's all going to feed into giving you the kind of home life that you want. And that's bloody brilliant. It's not about saying you shouldn't be doing this. The whole point of Mission Imperfect is to find the way that is right for you and to see that there are options.
yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're saying in very simple terms is don't ignore what makes you happy. Um, and that is, I mean, to
Excellent
be
advice.
honest, in my view, is there really a better marker of success when it comes to life? Let's be honest, because our happiness is so important. And a quote I heard, which I really like actually, is that life isn't a race you get to win at. It's not something you want to charge to the end of, right? You don't want to be the first to get
Take
to
your
that
time.
line. So yeah, exactly. So don't worry about being preoccupied what other people are doing in their lanes, in their life that looks completely different to yours, because it's going to be in your own weird and wonderful lane, doing your thing your way, which is basically what this whole
Absolutely.
podcast is about.
Yes. Beautifully put. Yes.
Thank you. And that we know life isn't all rosy and straightforward. So yes, we are talking about happiness, but we know that there are times when things don't go according to plan. But actually, isn't another marker of success actually that how well you have coped and got through all of the tougher times as well? I think that's actually quite an easy thing to ignore. Again, we think about success is having
Mm.
these things, having these markers to show our success, but actually it can be the fact that we have got through difficult stuff as well.
Yeah, it's about what you've overcome as well as what you've achieved. And I think it's something we mentioned in the episode on self-belief, if I remember rightly, but don't quote me, is that we've all got 100% track record for coping with all of life's shit, however hard it might feel at the time. And uh, whatever you choose in life to achieve your version of success, there will be times when you are not feeling good about it. There are going to be times when you are not happy and everything feels difficult. And that's okay. And, it's not a simple upward trajectory, is it?
Yeah.
And it's that knowledge that you can cope, that somehow you are going to get through this. You don't have to know how. I think that's what is so hard a lot of the time, isn't it? You don't know how you're going to get through and overcome this. But if you look back at every other situation where you felt that way, you did. Somehow you did.
Yeah. That
And
might be a resilience episode. Just
oh,
again, don't
good.
quote me, be interesting. If maybe one of us has got it or neither of us have, that would be interesting.
Okay, so dear listener, just listen to all of them and you'll find it.
Yeah, so, although we've said it again, so
Yeah,
it doesn't
there
really
you go.
matter. But yeah, our point is, I guess, we can get hung up on success having to mean these sort of big monumental outcomes and things, and what we're saying is actually they don't. And what about things that you have been doing during your life, learning and growing as a person as well, just during your life experiences? I actually think those are markers of success too. So I hope we've given you a few alternative thoughts, and we'd love you to think about what your idea of success looks like. We're going to come on to that in a moment because I'm skipping ahead to the question, but let's just give you a couple of our favorite quotes. I particularly like this one. This is: success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. That's
Yes.
W.P. Kinsella, and I really like that because it's one of those sort of simple ones, but you have to just kind of make sure you follow it to check in what they're saying. But yeah, the
Yeah.
happiness is wanting what you get.
It being open to the possibility that whatever happens can make you happy. You don't have to be have that blinkered.
Mm.
This is the way to success approach. That's brilliant. Yeah. Um, okay, and one that I liked and that ties in neatly with our previous episode on failure is success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts, from that drunken old sage, Winston Churchill.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Not neither of those states are sort of absolute, are they? So when we inevitably experience, hopefully, some of both, there is still a way forward. And that's kind of what I was saying about this bit about our learning and growth and getting through those tricky times as well. I think being important parts of the journey, and I think a marker of your success in life, even if it's not that perhaps very traditional view. I like this one: 80% of success is showing up. That's Woody Allen. And I think this is the irony. You have to show up in your own life, right? You can't actually hide from yourself, can you? As much
Oh,
as sometimes
I think people
you can
try
hide,
quite hard.
yeah, you can hide from other people, you can hide from the outside world, but you can't actually hide from your own life. So if you're having to show up in your own life, I think you're already part way there. But
Well,
we can make it
80% of the
count
way then.
in ways that work for us, right? And that's kind of the point I think with that one.
Too true. So hit us with the question.
Right. Yes. So it's a big one. It's a big one this week. And it's: what does success look like for you personally at this stage of your life? And so good news, obviously there is no wrong answer, just the one that's right for you. So,
Yes,
but
no.
we would encourage you all to have a little think about this one. And I found it quite helpful to have a think about. And I deliberately put at this stage of your life, because I acknowledged that, back in my 20s and even some of my 30s, my idea of success was very different to what it is now. It I was a bit more interested in the career ladder, the working my way up in HR. And it was all fine at the time, and I really enjoyed where I worked. But actually now for me it's a lot more about simpler things. I
Mhm.
don't really have any status much at all, and it doesn't
Mhm.
bother me. You know, I introduce myself as a life coach, which I know is a big fat question mark for some people, but that's okay. If they want to know more about it, I'm very happy to talk about it. Um, because the bit that matters to me is what I do.
Mm.
I know how valuable it is, and I love helping others through coaching. But I do have a constant, and that has been travel. I love travel. For me, if I can go away and see places in the world, that to me is a marker of my personal success. To experience different places, different cultures. I'll be honest, Kirsty, I would be very happy to have that luxury holiday, but I also really enjoy just sightseeing and seeing places, and as long as it's safe, and just seeing what's what's going on. And I have a huge amount of places on my bucket list, and they really vary. To be honest, you can pretty much cover the globe, and I'd be interested in going there. But we'll see where I get to next.
Well, I mean, okay, I'm going to give the spoiler here because you did in your notes put some down, and I found it intriguing. So I'm going to share. So you've listed
Okay.
Japan, the Maldives, Switzerland, Iceland, Vietnam, Madagascar. Wow. Yeah,
No, but there's a reason for each of them, and they've all got these lovely highlights. I think would be so amazing, and it's not to do it just to say, oh, been there, done it, ticket kind of thing.
I've
It's not
done
like
that.
that. I would just like to see and experience. So something like the Northern Lights. When they were visible here in the UK, and people have shared these amazing pictures. I saw nothing. I was so
Same,
disappointed. It's just like, do
same.
I have rubbish eyes? I don't know what's going on. Although some
We
people, I
we
think, could
we
only
went to
see them.
Iceland and failed to see them as well. Saw
I know,
point.
and that would be
Mm.
a little bit gutting, I have to say, if I because I'm not a cold weather person. If I'm really honest, that's down there for a very specific reason. The Northern Lights. I don't do the cold. I really don't. That's so my flip side. That's why the Maldives is on there. I like warmth and sunshine. But you're not always guaranteed it, though, are you? But anyway, we could digress. We don't want to turn into a travel episode. So, Kirsty, tell us about your markers of success.
Okay, again, mine have become, I was going to say low key. I'm not sure, as in low key, not the Norse god. Um, but yeah, so the word when you put that question down and I read it, the words that were coming up for me were peaceful, secure, growth, learning, contentment. And I think success for me, the secure aspect is, I don't want to be worried that someone's going to reclaim the house or that I'm not going to be able to eat. So there is a practical element to my idea of success, but it's mostly about how I want to be, how I want to feel.
Yeah,
And that started to prove really useful in decision making, and understanding the choices available to me and what they mean.
yeah. I think
And
that's
it,
such a valid point.
yeah, and it feels good that I don't have to fall back on a random job title to make me feel worthy in other people's eyes. I'm much like you said around it. I mean, you said you don't really have any status. I might be inclined to argue with that, but I know what you mean. And yeah, and I feel the same way. And likewise, it doesn't bother me now. I can be entertained rather than upset or offended or insulted by somebody else's reaction to me and what I do and where I am in life.
Mhm.
That's about them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That
I
feels
love
good.
that. Oh, very, very wise, Kirsty. So perhaps when people are listening might have a go at answering that question themselves. So just to recap, it's what does success look like for you personally at this stage of your life? Maybe reflect on the feelings that are associated with that. If you're struggling to come up with things, think about the feelings and then what might help create those feelings. That might be a way to tackle the question. So I think that's it for this week. We will be back next week talking all about money, which is interesting because we've just been talking about it as a possible marker of success, but we've decided to dedicate a whole episode to it. So we will see you next week for that one. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.